2.8-inch Recon tires are nice tires for summer trails. Where I'm riding, there are a lot of rocks and roots, and during the autumn everything usually is wet. I'm leaving the Recon on the rear tire, but the front definitely had to go. I just swapped for another wheel with the 2.8-inch Minion. Speccing a bike like this with the 2.8 Recon tires isn't really a mistake, but it's not the most versatile tires. So depending on your terrain and climate, they might be a great choice. For me, they don't really work. It feels like the rear suspension has got a lot of support. I can pedal quite efficiently, and the sensation I get when riding a bit harder is that there is a bit of compression damping going on. It doesn't feel like the rear end sinks deep in the travel, even at the larger hits. But when looking at the O-ring afterwards, it does indeed go through all its travel. So, well, I quite like the suspension. A bit different feel than I'm used to, but it's efficient both on hits and when pedaling. The 150mm travel Fox 34 rhythm fork is quite nice. Being a 34mm stanchion fork, it's quite burly. There is a bit of vibration and flex going on, but for this kind of bike with a 140mm travel frame, it's just fine. The MT520 are really nice. It's great that Shimano have introduced a 4-piston brake at a reasonable price, and the feeling of the brake lever might not be as good as the more expensive Shimano brakes, but still really good. It's still a lot of power. If you go on a ride and need to realign the caliper, you might have difficulties using a multi-tool, because the body of the multi-tool will crash into the caliper. Another thing to mention is this rail. You can attach the tech pack, a second battery, to double the range. Also, you could install a bottle cage. Well, it's a bit of a tight fit, so I guess that's why Focus has made this slight dent on the top tube. The downside to that is if you have a crash, you will possibly dent the frame or ruin the shift or possibly the brake lever. If this was my bike, I wouldn't tighten the shifter and brake so hard, so if I have a crash and the shifter hits the top tube, it would just slide out of the way. The drivetrain on this bike is a mix of the Shimano XT and SLX. It's perfectly fine, it's all I ever need. The Focus Jam2 is a fine bike. It looks sleek with the battery integrated into the frame. It's not too bad geometry-wise. The rear end is a bit long, it's 457mm. Head angle at 66.5 is okay for a mid-travel bike. The top tube, you could say, is perhaps a tad short, but with a long rear end, I think it's okay. It's the battery that makes this bike a bit special. Focus decided that a smaller battery would be okay. They're referring to a couple of studies showing that some 85% of all e-mountain bike rides are less than 35 kilometers long. So they decided why carry more battery than you need. So they removed 25% of the battery cells, and by integrating it into the frame, They don't need the key lock cylinder or those metal clamps to hold the battery. And by just sticking the battery into the down tube and not cutting out a section at the bottom, they don't need to add any further reinforcement. Other bikes and manufacturers using like the Shimano and Bosch batteries for frame integration, they require a lot of reinforcement because you're basically cutting away a large section of the down tube, and that makes the frame less rigid. So they have to internally reinforce it, and that adds a lot of weight. So Focus is saving weight on the battery and also on the battery integration. And we're talking like 500-600 grams just for the battery, and at least a kilogram, if not even more, on the frame. So that makes the Focus Jam2 quite lightweight, and I can definitely feel that on the trails. Lifting the front wheel over ledges, obstacles, it's quite easy. I don't have to use all the body language that I'm used to handle the bike. It handles quite nicely. It's just a slightly long rear end that sort of tames it a bit.